Hi, it's me, Ingrid P. And I was going to do an Edinburgh video, but instead I'm going to do a venting video where I talk about my vacation in France, visiting my family, and why I was so frustrated at the end of my trip, and why I'm so relieved to be back home on my own, living my own little life, doing what I want. Basically, I went to Scotland. That was wonderful. It was a really good trip, and I got to decide everything. And then I went to France, and I met with my brother, which was wonderful. He had a lot of stories about the Olympics. He was really interested in the Olympics, and he was a volunteer in the Olympics. And he told me everything about like how it worked and what he did and all sorts of stuff. But yeah, encountering my parents was another thing, you know. So, first of all, my grandfather is losing his memory, but like that has been going on for a while. He was really interested in explaining to me about Japan, so I was like, oh yeah, great, I love Japan. I did have to remind him that I am not going to Japan right now, and that my plans were instead changed to go to Scotland. But the problem is that my grandfather is a really bad communicator, let's just say. I'm not the best, but like he's way worse. He mumbles when he speaks. He doesn't make it exciting. He often like recites these these dates, and he has great memory for dates and such like that. But and the samurai, and also his opinions on politics is different than mine. He is right wing, so he'll say certain things that aren't very politically correct sometimes, and he'll sometimes talk about capitalism like being a good thing, I'm not that kind of person politically, but okay. So I'll listen to my grandfather ramble on, but once he's done his ramble, I don't want to have that ramble once again. And then when we're ending, I try to end the conversation, then he's like, oh, well, when you have time, we can talk about this more. And I'm like, no, I don't want to. So I did get into fights with my grandfather. Not just because of the Japan stuff, but because of other things. I try to stay civil and, just let him blab. But he thought that he had gone to Japan in 2018, which can't be true because he said that he was with my grandma. And my grandma died in 2015 or 16, I don't remember. So he was like, oh, well, then it must have been 2014. And I was like, no, that can't be right, And then I looked at the map and at his travel guides and such. They're all from the 80s, but he did have a map that he had picked up over there, and it was from 2005. So I think at the latest, it must have been 2007 or something that he went there. Like when my brother was a baby, something like that. But yeah, so he mixes things up. That's fine. It's a little bit worrying because it seems like he's lost a lot of weight. And he doesn't feel the temperature. Like it was over 30 degrees where I was, and he was wearing a scarf, And that's the kind of thing that old people do. They can't regulate their temperature anymore. But also he's really thin, and I don't know. It might be the last time I'm seeing him. So I really felt like I had to do this trip. Not because anybody told me to, but it felt like this trip I needed to touch bases with my family. Even though it wasn't great, because, every family has their own conflicts, but like at the moment it's at the, we're trying all to keep it together. But okay, with my grandfather losing his memory and not really taking care of himself, I think that he might die he goes on these daily walks in the mountains and doesn't tell anybody he goes. And I'm worried that he might fall and hit his head, and then, well, that's the end of him. you know. But I don't have a great relationship with my grandfather. So, of course, I'll be sad if he dies, but it's not like, you know, if it's approximately the same as my grandmother, then I don't think that I'll be completely devastated. Let's just say he brings more problems into my life than like actual love, you know. Not to be crass, you know, I do love my grandfather, but it's like there are certain people that you love more than others, okay? So we'll see what happens. Anyway, he's old and it's okay, you know. I've made peace with the fact that, well, he can't live forever. But what is more difficult to make peace with is that my uncle is dying. My uncle in the US has pancreatic cancer, which my mom's dad, my grandfather, died of when she was 20. So, of course, it's affecting her. And while I was in Scotland, I got a message through Instagram stories, you know. My aunt doesn't know how to use Instagram, so she's just like, oh, I'll just write to Ingrid that her English breakfast looks yummy and that her uncle is going into hospice in the same, basically in the same sentence. I was like, okay, I'm sorry about that. Like, I didn't know how to respond, but okay, if he's going into hospice, that's not good. That's not something that you want to hear, but okay. So I wrote to my mom, and my mom went ballistic. She didn't know that it was time for hospice now, and anyway, it seems like my mom will be going to the United States to visit my uncle in next month. I kind of I kind of advised her to go sooner rather than later, because I think that my uncle only has a few months left to live, and I did talk to my best friend, the ISFJ, who is actually specializing in geriatrics, so he knows everything about palliative care. I told him what I knew about the situation, and he said, yeah, I think it would be best if your mom went now rather than later. So yeah, apparently he fell yesterday and is in the hospital right now. He has metastasis to his liver, so it doesn't look good, and now they've given up on all curative, so now he's only on palliative care. And my mom's experience is that her dad died within 3 months, and that's kind of how pancreatic cancer goes. My uncle has lived a whole year with pancreatic cancer, so he's already past the time, let's just say. I haven't seen my uncle since 2016, so it's not like I had a super close relationship with him, but I did find him much more fun to be around than, for example, my grandfather. So it's more the distance, the physical distance, then like personality-wise, we were clicking much better, let's just say, and communication-wise. But now my uncle is, it's sad though, because he was an extrovert like my mom, and they would talk for hours and hours and hours, and now he's not doing that because he's too weak for that. And I think that my mom will be very lonely if he dies. When he dies, because he will die soon, probably. I don't think I'll ever see him again. But I'm okay with that because I'm just his niece and I haven't seen him for a while. And my mom, it's her brother, it's much closer to her, and she knows him much better than I do. So I think that she should go on that trip. But yeah, it is pretty heavy. to be in that house. And I don't want to put my own problems onto her right now when she's going through all this. But when will be the right time? Never, you know? When will be the right time for me to talk about the things that I want her to support me with? Like, after he's dead? When he's died? I mean, when? Because then there's a whole grief and mourning part. And I feel so selfish for wanting to come with my problems. But the thing is, I've had these things that I want to tell my mom that I've kept hidden for 10 years. One of them is that I'm gay, and the other one is that I need my parents' help for my autism ADHD diagnosis process, because they need to be interviewed. And yeah, I can't really tell my mom about my mental health. And I just felt that now wasn't the right time. And so talking about that is my mom's cousin is gay, happens to be gay, and he called my mom to tell her that she needs to get on the next plane to see her brother because he's dying. And he does like to be dramatic, okay? He is a dramatic guy. But my mom like turned it into the fact that he's gay means that he's dramatic, and gay men are like this, are in a certain way, and they're meddling and nosy and flamboyant, but not in a good way, you know. And yeah, so I was like, okay, I'm not about to tell my mom that at the moment it was Pride Week in Stockholm. Yeah. And then my mom talked about how the Olympics was too gay, basically. She loved the opening ceremony because the artistic is beautiful. It's really beautiful. I loved it. But she said that the drag race stuff and the gay stuff was too much. And sure, it was a bit too much for Olympics. I think it would have been a really good Eurovision opening ceremony. Because yeah, the ceremony of in the Olympics is like the whole world is watching. Eurovision is mostly, you know, progressive Europeans who are watching. Sure, there's Australians too, apparently, and they also tune in. But it's a very gay, like campy kind of show. But since France does so badly in the Eurovision every year, then that day will never come that Eurovision will be in France, basically. But so the Olympics, they did it a little bit much, considering that, like, you know, there are dictatorships that are watching the Olympics. But it is good that they talk about, you know, freedom and democracy, freedom of speech and all that, because that is very important in French culture. But I thought I was hallucinating. Like, the country I left, France, in 2014, they had just gotten gay marriage legalized when I left France. I didn't know I was gay by then, but I had never heard or seen gay people or gay things in my life, in media, on the street. It was always negatively portrayed. So to know that, like, I never knew that 10 years later I would see France have drag queens for the Olympic ceremony. Like, I would never have believed you had you said that to me 10 years ago. And I'm so happy. I'm so happy for that, you know? I'm so happy to see the Olympic committee, like, actually tried to make it as diverse as possible. And they included LGBTQ people. They didn't need to do that. And they did it. And it was successful, you know? obviously it sparked controversy because, well, people misinterpreted a lot of stuff, and maybe they were a little bit too out there, let's just say, but I found it beautiful. And my mom found it beautiful as well, except for the fact that there was so much drag queen stuff. My mom does not get the drag queen stuff. So, yeah. And it's just that my mom has these ideas about gay people, and then it's like, she's not homophobic, but, you know, it doesn't give me like the courage to tell her. Anyway, there was that. And then there was also the fact that my uncle is, his two daughters have kids who are ADHD, and one of them has autism. And my mom was like, yeah, but he's very autistic. It's not like these people who just say that they're autistic. And then she's like, also, she said, oh, all my friends say that they have ADHD, but because they lose their keys sometimes. That's not ADHD. And I said, I agreed with her. No, that's not ADHD, but a lot of people are getting diagnosed right now. And they might have other difficulties than just losing their keys. My mom didn't want to listen to that. I suspect my mom has ADHD, but she would never admit to that, because her idea of autism and ADHD is not, you know, up to date. It's okay, but she brought this up herself, you know? It wasn't like I brought up the subject of ADHD and autism. And I was about to tell my parents maybe that, you know, that I might suspect, you know, that a psychologist might call them to ask them questions about my childhood in order for getting a diagnosis. My mom doesn't even believe in like depression, so how are we going to get to that point? Hearing her talk about ADHD and autism in that way, and on her own, you know, of her own volition, I didn't try to steer in any way. I tried to, you know, be like the reasonable one who says like, you know, well, maybe there is more to ADHD than just losing your keys, or you know, maybe not everybody. And my mom's like, yeah, I know it's a spectrum, but it's not, you know, she basically finds that everybody in the US is diagnosed with ADHD, and they all have pills, and that it's all bad, you know, and the autistic people are really disabled, you know, they're all high support needs, and that the only autistic people are those who are not, either those who are nonverbal or those who are extreme geniuses. Like, you know, it's that old version. And if I tried to correct her, she would be a little bit suspicious, you know. I tried, but it took a lot of energy out of me, because I was already trying to support my mom with my uncle and all that, and supporting everyone so that we don't have a conflict about silly things. So I couldn't bring up my own stuff. I got really upset because we started talking about, we have this summer place that my grandparents built when in the 60s, 70s in Spain, and that is basically a shack, but the shack has now been squatted, and there are squatters since 3 years back, and my dad and my grandfather, since they're the ones who know Spanish, they're the ones who own the place. They are involved in the legal stuff, but you know, court cases take years, and my mom is very impatient, and she just started shouting that my dad and my grandfather aren't doing anything, and I'm sitting there trying to be mediator. And okay, INFPs are mediators, but I am not a good mediator. I can't I can't do it. And I had to go to my room and close the door and take a nap and have a panic attack. I'm not proud of it, but I did write to Schumann and like a panic, let's just say, because I couldn't deal with more, and I find like I revert back to my 18-year-old self when I'm with my parents, and it's like I can't stand up for myself. I can't talk about my own problems. I have to deal with everybody else's problems instead. And if I say, oh, that's not my problem, then everybody says that I'm like the bad person who's putting my head in the sand. It's like, these are not my problems. Everybody expects me to take in everybody else's problems as my own. Because, like, for example, that house, oh, well, it will be yours one day. Sure, but I'm not involved in the court cases, so I'm not going to, like, barge in and tell my dad that he's not doing anything. And my mom, my uncle dying, sure, it's my problem because I love my uncle, but I can't decide for my mom if she's going to go to the US or not. And it felt a little bit like she was asking me, like, how many months more does he have to live if he's going to hospice? And I can't answer that. Nobody can answer that. And somehow my parents make their problems into my problems. And that's not the case, you know? At least it seems like my brother has figured out a way to sneakily, because he is sneaky, to sneakily do what he wants to do. He kind of just says, oh, I'm going to be meeting my friends today. And like his friends are in another city far away, and then he just goes. But he doesn't take into account that, like, well, my dad needs to drive him to the train station and wake up early and do all this stuff for him. But my brother manages to, like, rig the system somehow to get my parents to do things so that his plans work. But for me, I'm just so accommodating all the time. I'm just like, I don't know if it's this like eldest daughter syndrome, like this kind of thing that's on the internet. They keep talking about the eldest daughter syndrome. I don't have more siblings. I only have one brother, but I am kind of in that eldest daughter syndrome where I'm supposed to be like the responsible, diplomatic one who is like, doesn't have any problems on her own, and that is supposed to help everybody get along. I'm supposed to help my parents get along, and I'm supposed to make sure that I'm nice to my grandfather, and I'm supposed to deny my own needs and be quiet and all sorts of stuff. So it was such a relief that I was going to leave. I was like, oh my God, thank God I only booked myself for a week in France, because I couldn't have dealt with more of this. So I was so happy to board a plane, which I had booked on the same day as my grandfather was booking the plane, because I am so accommodating, right? And then they still made it so that it seemed like I was not thinking about other people by booking my tickets, because I made my grandfather come to the airport 2 hours in advance for his plane. Like, wow, I couldn't find, there was no flight that went exactly at the time of his flight. And so there are these things that like frustrate me to no end. Like flying to Lyon. I wanted to go to Lyon to meet our friend Sick. But then my grandfather is like, why don't you fly to Geneva? It would have been closer. and that we would have all been able to see you. It's like, I have a life outside of you, you know? I see my grandfather as often as I see my parents, and I don't want to see him as often as I see my parents, you know? I wish I could see my parents more often, a shortened amount of time, but I live in a different country, so it's more like I have to maximize the week that I have with them. Yeah, so I have a lot of frustrations, and I felt like I couldn't talk about my own problems. You know, if I started talking about my work or about Scotland, you know, things that make me happy, or things that make me sad, you know, it's just like, it wasn't important to them, and nobody listens to me, and they all rely on me somehow. And it's like, okay, you're relying on somebody who's not even, you're relying on somebody who's not even in the country, you know, and I am worried about, you know, once my grandfather dies, that my dad will go ballistic, because he has all of these emotions that he's suppressing. I mean, I know how it went when his mom died. It wasn't good, and, you know, I keep having to, like, turn off fires that are burning up in different areas, you know? And my mom, when her brother dies, then my mom will be even more strange with me and telling me her stuff. And yeah, I don't know. I don't know how often I want to go to France again. I think that maybe at Christmas I will go somewhere completely different. My mom was like, oh, but you didn't need to come this summer. And it's like, I kind of did. And not just because I was guilting myself, it's because, you know, I'm trying to focus on what's important. But next time I'm not going to see them. I can't deal with their whole dramas. And I have my own life to live. And unfortunately, I don't know, it doesn't include seeing them. If they want to come, they're welcome to come. They're not coming to Sweden to visit me. I don't know why. I mean, they could, but they're not doing that. So yeah, that's all I had to say. I will be doing the Edinburgh series and doing more fun videos, but I did need to have a video to vent. So thank you guys. Have a great day.